What's up, gang? Wes here again with the Meta Monday video on Tuesday because my planning is terrible. I was competing at the ProQuest this weekend and just had a bunch of stuff to catch up on Monday. So unfortunately, we're coming at you today on Tuesday. But fortunately, that means we get to take a look at this Meta Minute article from LSS. Before we move on too much further, I do want to point out one of the very first things they mentioned in this article is that not only is a very strong possibility that Aurora will reach Living Legend next weekend. I believe she's at like 900 something now, so it's like all but guaranteed. They mentioned that she won't be gone for long. Fret not, all you shock frockers out there. A hero this iconic and fun and powerful won't be gone for long. So I'm assuming it's going to be some form of new Aurora. So like Aurora, but with a different ability, different title. But mostly the same card pool will come back. I think that's good just due to the Armory deck they came out with. If you picked one up like a month ago and then she got LL'd a month after, like that's just a terrible new player experience. And the Armory decks are supposed to be an introduction for new players into the game. So it makes a lot of sense to me that they would do that. I think the question is just going to be, do we see it before Nats and what form is it coming out in? My guess is it would be like some kind of like Armory promo or something like that, perhaps. But, only time will tell at this point. Next, the Florian continues to be the second best deck, arguably even S tier with Aurora at this point. The Scepter builds are running around doing, rune chant stacking things, so pretty good. I think Florian and Aurora have the best matchup spreads currently, which makes a lot of sense for why they are seeing the most wins. New is our next best deck. I think as the meta slows down, she has better anti-fatigue or fatigue tools herself. Mask of Recurring Nightmares, her hero ability, stuff like that. Like, she has pretty good fatigue tools. So I think as the meta slows down, New will probably rise or we've already sort of seen her rise as the best of the assassins here. I do still think Slippy is worth playing and is probably neck and neck with New as long as Aurora still exists. There will be aggro decks running around, and I think Slippy is just better into them than this anti-fatigue version of New that I think will come out in week 4 of the ProQuest season after Aurora LLs. Next, we have Slippy himself, or themselves. Slippy is, like I said, still pretty good into Aurora. You have match game into a lot of these heroes that you can see here on this chart. I think really you're only worried about other assassins and maybe chance stack Florian. Kano and Verdance, I guess we'll just go ahead and talk about now. I think as the meta continues to slow down, they only get better. The more time that these decks are giving you to set up your combo, which is like almost a guaranteed kill, if not definitely a guaranteed kill, they just become better and better. Jarl, you can see here also at 6 wins, is doing pretty good for himself. I think probably that's a little bit misleading. I do have him at the top of, I think, B tier in my tier list, but I'm unsure how good he actually is. You kind of lose to Wizards, so it's kind of like the boogeyman for you. But outside of that, I think you're mostly okay into everything else other than Prism, so Wizards and Prism. However, the issue is that I think both of these two Wizards, being Verdance and Kano, and Prism, are all top meta right now. I think they're all A tier at least. So that's not good for Guardian players. So I don't think I'm comfortable putting Jarl higher than B tier simply for that reason. We could see a few more heroes picked up wins here and there, nothing too notable. Syndra with 4 wins is a little bit surprising, I would think, simply because most people should have their shelters and understand how to block now, but I believe people are pivoting to links in the sideboard. However, I think at that point you should just be playing FaB, personally. He has better anti-fatigue tools and can use the Mask of the Pouncing Links better, in my opinion. But Syndra does have these really cool spiky aggro turns with either Wrath of Retribution, or if you find Wrath, you can crack links and grab Blood Runs Deep, since it's a 2-power, flick 2 daggers, throw them or attack with them again, sort of thing. since they're discounted by Wrath. So you have a pretty cool little spiky turn that you can do, but I don't think it's super, super consistent. But you could be doing worse in the meta. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about on this little pie chart, or whatever this is called. We're going to go ahead and get into the tier list now. Like I said, Aurora, Florian are probably both S tier at this point. I think Florian was here last week, and now I was on the fence last week, and now I'm like convinced that he's S tier. Not really too much to say there. If you've been playing Flesh and Blood the last couple of weeks, you know what's going on with these two heroes. They just have really good matchup spreads and answers to a lot of the meta. Here in A tier, we have some heroes that I think are good answers to the meta. Prism specifically, I think is going to be interesting once Aurora LLs. We might see the Iris build come back. If the decks try to slow down the games too much, they're just going to struggle to deal with Spectra, and Prism's just going to throw 4 go again, 4 go again, 4 go again, 4 go again, and you're not really going to be able to stop her. New, like I said, has some good anti-fatigue tools and both Mask of Recurring Nightmares, her hero ability, among other things. So I think she's probably A tier right now. She also has, I think, of the assassins, the best wizard matchup. So I think she feels pretty good here in A tier. Kano, Verdance, we talked about. They have pretty good matchups into any of these decks that are trying to be slow. Kano specifically has a really good aggro game plan now with I think it's called the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile list that's going around, abusing the draw 2 from Flood. I can't talk. What is it called? Open the Floodgates, that's the card. And Overflow the Aether Well has just made the deck's kills early in the game really consistent, since you can just burn through your deck really quickly. I think the only thing you're really worried about as Kano is these two heroes right here. Florian gets kind of dumpstered by you. Aurora is, I want to say, Kano favored, at least in my experience as the Aurora player. And all of my PQs this season, and even in the RTN season, Kano just kind of blows you up, like on turn 2 or 3 with like ridiculous consistency. So I think that's pretty good spot for him to be in, being able to both combat aggro and combat these slower control decks with his combo, pitch stack combo or not. Verdant's similar. You have good matchups into the slower decks since they let you pitch stack your combo and then just blow them up. I think you also have a decent matchup into Aurora and stuff like that. You kind of hate to see Exude in the meta right now, but if the Exudes and the Command & Conquers don't really line up that well for your opponents on aggro, then you just kind of do typical wizard things. Slippy, we already talked about, not too much else to say there. B tier, like I said, I don't feel comfortable putting Jarl into anything higher than B tier when he's bad into basically all of these decks except maybe Aurora. I don't even think the Aurora's matchup is as good as Jarl players want it to be, but it's pretty good. It's probably like 55 or 60% for Jarl. Azalea, same thing. You're bad into several of these decks, especially if CYP comes back. The dominate matters less, since it'll be hard for the damage to get through if they just convert their hands anyway to life gain. And then obviously Prism's bad for you. Wizard is, I'm actually not sure about that one. Wizard seems like it would be bad for you, but I actually don't know. Azalea is kind of a red line deck for those of you that don't know. So paying to Arcane Barrier is not generally something you're interested in doing. But you do have access to it on a lot of your base equipment, like your hat, your arms. You have the Enchanted Quiver that you can run. So there's some play into it, I would guess. But I think you sort of just become worse as Aurora shifts out of the format, because this is pretty much the matchup you want to see. This and probably Arachne, if I had to guess. Dio, if you're looking at this top meta here, there's not really a ton Dio can do except maybe against Wizard and Aurora, actually, for that matter. So like you're okay into these decks, simply because Mechanologist has like a ridiculous toolkit that they can use. Like Dissolution Sphere is good into Chant, Stack, Florian. Signal Jammer, I believe, is the other card that they use to beat Wizard, since it says you can only play 1 non-attack per turn. So that's, pretty good against Kano. I think that's like a really bad matchup for Kano, actually, is Dio. So you have like this matchup and this matchup that I think are pretty good for you. Outside of that, I think it's kind of rough, but you have other matchups down here, which at local meta level, most local metas will have like a decent smattering of these other heroes and not just be this, like it would be at like a calling or something per se. So worth keeping that in mind. Vincent, similar boat. You have a couple good matchups in here, like Prism, Aurora, potentially Wizard, because you can run like pretty decent anti-arcane stuff with like your boots, and I think there's a couple other pieces that you could run as well. Vincent players, let me know what you think about the Wizard matchup in the comments. But I think I feel comfortable leaving her here for now. But I do think she gets worse as the meta slows down, unless the Vincent players are able to figure out a recursion package or some kind of anti-fatigue strategy, which I know you can set up like those big RuneGate three RuneGate turns or more, depending on how the setup goes, but I'm unsure how consistent that is. Victor, as the decks are slowing down, I think Victor is actually better than Jarl, simply because he can present more pressure into the slower decks and then into any aggro decks running around like Aurora, or once she LLs like the ninjas and Dio and stuff like that, I think he becomes better. The issue there, and why I wouldn't put him above B tier even once Aurora LLs, is going to be that the inherent variance of Clash is just going to suck for you no matter what. So if you're averse to that sort of thing, I probably wouldn't be playing Victor, but I do think he's still a good hero, especially if the clashes go your way. Fang, same spot as he's always been. You're good if you turn online. If you don't, you suck. So consistency issues. And I guess for that matter, or for that reason, I'd probably put KO above them. I think KO is a deck that's a little bit underrepresented right now and is pretty good. You block really well into like assassins and stuff like that. You have some pretty good tools to anti-fatigue, and some of your brute class cards have intimidate on them. Specifically, there's also like Savage Beatdown as well, which I think comes in for like some stupid number that you can do, dirty KO things with. So I think there's some counterplay here for KO to fatigue. So worth keeping an eye on him. I do think he's underplayed right now. Next in C tier, we have Draconic Ninjas. It is what it is. I think Vi is going to be a little bit better than Syndra, if not like a decent amount better than Syndra when Aurora LLs, simply because he has that Phoenix Flame loop he can do in the end game to not get fatigued. Cilio is interesting, but I don't think he is ever going to be higher than C or B tier, simply because of all these cards that don't block, making Disruption really effective against you. Ira, I could see being B tier. You have pretty good like chip damage, so I think that's worth considering. And then also with the Armory deck, I could see her getting even more stock in the meta going up. So a hero to keep an eye on. Wouldn't be a bad time to pick her up and pick up her cards before the Armory deck actually comes out, and we know whether or not she's actually any good. Riptide, again, you only are good if like Fi, Syndra, Dio, and Assassins are good. Assassins are about to get worse with the exception of New, and obviously I've put the ninjas here in C tier. So unfortunately Riptide is also going to be in C tier. Mario, I think, could be maybe B tier, something like that, but personally I just think he's worse than the other two Assassins at this point in the meta. So I'd probably be playing one of them over him. Over them, I should say. Dorinthia, I think there's maybe an argument if you're like a Dorinthia specialist, or you have some kind of game plan you formed with like Dauntless or some kind of Switchblade thing. But without that, C tier. Levia, you have your recursion package, you have Bloodrush Fellows, you present pretty good damage as well, but I do think most decks would be able to fatigue you, especially with everybody running a million defense reactions right now and converting for, what is it, if you have four blocks in hand, you convert your hand for like 16 on defense, which is crazy. So I definitely saw that happen over the ProQuest weekend several times. I saw people with four blocks in their hand. So if your opponent just didn't attack them, they would basically do nothing on their turn. However, if you're getting attacked and you have to attack, like with Levia, where you need to turn off Blood Debt, you don't really have the option. Kasai, I think, has been in a bad spot for a while now. She's not like the worst deck. She's kind of like likes to grind you, similar to Fang. But if you're just going to do that, I would just play Fang. He's a little bit inconsistent, but your payoff is way better than Kasai's. So until she gets something that gives her better payoff, like some more gold generation for the army card that creates the little soldiers, or I don't know, just something, she's probably going to stay down here in C tier. Max, I still don't know really where he is. I haven't really seen much info on the Armory deck. I played against it a couple times on Talishar, and it didn't really impress me. I think the mech is still just better. And the game plans, honestly, and the deck building seem samey to me. Or the play style, play patterns, whatever you want to call it, I think are very samey. So he's probably in C tier, but I'll leave him here for now because I'm no Max player. DIE, I haven't, I don't know, because I think she is in a very good position to bring back Slapdash. With the Wizards coming around, she can run the Signal Jammers and Plasma mainlines to make them stick around longer. Against the Chant Stack Florian, she can run Dissolution Sphere, and against a lot of these other decks, she can just do her typical Exodia pistol thing. So once Aurora leaves and the meta slows down even more, which is what I'm predicting is going to happen, I think Slapdash, even now, I think Slapdash is still a very reasonable choice. So keep an eye out for that. Teklo is sort of like DIE, except instead of trying to assemble Exodia with pistol items, he's just trying to transform into the Mechropotent and do Mechropotent things. So sort of similar to the mech game plan in Max in that regard, I guess. You block pretty well, you do that thing, and then, you know, they're trying to help you out with Arcane Barrier, so Wizards, I assume, still very scary for you. Jarl's probably scary for you since he can just stop you from doing the thing. So that's worth considering, but a lot of these other heroes I think he's actually pretty decent into. Finally, we'll go on to Rhinar, who's in the I don't know tier, because as I've said in one of my previous videos, Intimidate sure is a mechanic that he has on his hero ability, so the more decks want to block you, the better Rhinar becomes. You have your pitch stack plan that you can do with your Barraging Beatdown, I believe is the card, where you can just pitch stack a bunch of Intimidates and then just remove the ability for your opponent to block. So if the meta slows down too much, I do think Rhinar becomes better. But like I said, it is worth noting that both of these other brutes do have access to a few Intimidate cards in the brute class. The difference is just that Rhinar has it printed on his hero ability, so he's always like an extra or a couple of extra Intimidates on those turns, which can be very, very valuable into decks that like to block you. And then finally, we have the Doo-Doo Poopy Pants tier here. I wouldn't be playing any of these particular heroes. Bolton and Uzi I could maybe see an argument for, but outside of that, these 5 heroes I just would not play at all. But these 2 heroes I could maybe see an argument for, putting them in like C tier or something like that. But in my opinion, they're not worth playing. Just play one of the other characters in the class and you will be better off. With that being said, I think that is going to do it for today. I'm very curious to see what happens once the Aurora deck LLs here in week 3. So that would mean going into week 4, we'll have another new meta, which is crazy for one ProQuest season. We had a Enigma leave in week 1, which obviously was like a hugely meta warping deck. It's allowing all these slower decks to come back. And then once Aurora leaves, probably the deck with the most consistent, or at least the easiest combo to pull off while presenting pressure, with the Flicker Wisp Arc Lightning combo. I think with that being gone, I think a lot of the decks will pivot to being slower again, and then the natural answers to those will be our Prisms, our Kanos, our Verdances, stuff like that. That is like, oh, you want to go slow? Me too, but I'll do it better. So that'll be, yeah, and DIE would be included in that as well. So that'll do it for today. Let me know what you guys are bringing to the ProQuest this weekend. Let me know how you did. I made it to top 8 in one of them and lost to a Slippy, unfortunately. I should have put my opponent on had to have the Tarantula Toxin, and I just didn't. I got scared by the toxicity on his Kiss of Death and blocked out and was trying to play towards drawing an arcane source of damage to strip his Spell Void and then kill him at 1. And it just didn't work out. So anyway, let me know how it went for y'all this weekend, and good luck to any of you playing. Peace!